Well, first of all, and most critical is make sure you have lots of cold water on site because you're going to need it. Secondly, make sure you got a really nice, strong, easy chair because you're going to take rest once in a while. Besides those two most essential tools, you want to buy yourself a couple of very inexpensive electric chainsaws from your local hardware store. Do not put oil in them as the instructions say because the oil just helps them gum up faster. And buy a couple of replacement blades, but do expect that these saws will die during the project. You'll lose a couple of saws per house. Another couple of tools that you'll need, you're going to need a framer square, and you're going to need a speed square, and that's just to make sure that your walls are rectilinear and square. You're also going to want to get a standard framer's level. With these three tools, you can pretty much expect that all your walls will be level and true and plumb. And that's very important while building any house, not just a raster house. Some of the other tools that you're going to want to have is a framer's hammer and any other hammers you might need to removing part of the rastra. You're going to want a tape to make your measurements, a chalk line to set your raster walls on the foundation. Buy yourself an inexpensive keyhole saw and a helper to hold all your tools. And ultimately, you're going to want to buy from your local rastra representative one of these glue guns and a couple of boxes of glue depending on the size of your house. This is really quite simple. These simply screw down into the gun, and then we use the gun to weld the rastra panels together, a dollop about every 4 inches, and that holds the panels plumb and true until we grout. Basic raster wall panels come 8.5, 10 inches, or 12 inches wide, and in panels may be purchased for some applications at doors and windows, while roof panels are specifically designed for additional reinforcing, and flat panels were created for decorative motif or veneers. Let's talk about the raster panels for just a minute before we talk about the rest of the house. This is just a small sample to show that the holes in rastra, the unique system that makes it patented, are vertical and horizontal at 15 inches on center. That allows us to stack our raster panels either horizontally, like you see in the wall behind us here. The panels are stacked horizontally, one on top of each other, or you could actually take this panel and stack it vertically, allowing you to curve the raster panel. Any geometry that you can imagine in plan can be manifest in the walls because of this ability to go horizontal or vertical. When we're forming a corner, it's a very simple matter to cut the rastra on a 45-degree angle through a corner, and then as we set that down on the foundation and go the opposite direction, that forms the corner with a solid core in the center. Soil conditions vary, so work closely with your structural engineer on designing a proper foundation. The raster product comes on large semi-trucks, so the site access must be as level as possible and cleared of trees. Stacked raster elements are heavy. Offloading requires attention to safety. Do not unstrap the stacks until the truck is at rest, and never move the truck after unstrapping. The product can be offloaded by forklift or by crane, and when using a crane, insert heavy-duty steel tubes or spreader bars into the bottom cells. Secure the lifting straps, then space the stacks evenly about the slab. For stacks located off slab, place on level ground with wood sleepers. Okay, we're going to start out here showing you the slab. This is a monolithic turned-down concrete slab. We're sitting on the edge of a 45-degree slope, so it's a very tall slab. In fact, the camera person's about to fall off on a 40-foot cliff, so be real careful. What we're going to do here first is we're going to mark 10 inches, and that shows the thickness of the raster panel as it moves across. We'll mark 10 inches from the back, and that shows where the raster panel goes. So this is going to be a corner right in here. And sometimes it's a good idea to draw the construction right on the slab so you know exactly what you're doing. Our first hole is going to be 5 inches in from either side because it's half of 10. That's going to be our first hole, and this will be cut at a 45 degree to make our corner. What we're doing now is we're stretching the line and going to pop the line where the rastra goes. Okay, very good. Let's move it to the next line. Now we're marking the inside of the wall. Okay. And we're marking another rastra wall to connect to the other corner. Again, we're coming in 7 inches from the outside of the slab because we have a stone veneer coming up. So we're measuring back 7 inches from all the sides, and you'll notice that that leaves in the center a 10-inch place for our rastra. I've brought the line only in 1.5 inches from the outside because if you remember, we have 6-inch holes in rastra that would be right here. This will be an in piece right here, and we want that rebar in the concrete. If this is 6 inches total and half of it's 3, half of that is 1.5 inches, and that's where you put your center line and your hole. So that's our first one. Then we measure 15 inches on center as we come down. There's 15, there's 30, and here's 45. When you build a rastra wall, you start at both ends and work towards the middle. That way your makeup is always in the middle where you don't mind panels being shorter. We're going to see how close we come to matching the holes coming from both directions. There's 15, there's another 15, and let's see where we stand on 15. There's another one. So right here, we're going to have 2 pieces of rebar pretty close together, and we're going to end up making a splice in the panels right there at that line. The concrete was just poured yesterday, so it's still quite green and soft. And we run those anchor bolts down, or the holes we run down about 6 inches. What we're doing in now is driving the rebar directly into the holes that were just freshly cut. And you can put epoxy grout down in there, but what we've learned is if we pound the rebar into a one-day-old slab, still a green slab, it seems to hang onto the rebar even better. Okay, you'll notice the 45-degree angle cut on a standard wall panel laid horizontally, how the rebar lined up with every vertical cell, and most critical is how the circle laid up here for our corner. And we're going to lift up another piece now and bring it this way and show how the cell remains centered over the rebar. See how the 45-degree comes together, and when we grout the cells, this will lock in this corner absolutely perfectly and symmetrically. What's wrong with this picture? The corner is not being cut through an open cell, but through the solid webbing. This won't give you a solid concrete corner and may compromise the structural integrity of the building. Remember, every time you cut a rastra element, be conscious of how the grout is going to flow. It's very important that everything is interconnected. In this case, because this wall is going to be used as a retaining wall, we're putting in number 4 rebar at 15 inches on center, because this is going to be behind about 5 feet of earth, retaining 5 feet of earth. And you'll notice that as we go up horizontally, we put in a corner 90-degree number 4 bar on every level, and then you lay in, and it's as simple as doing this, your your horizontal bars right over each other. One advantage of the rastra system is the steel does not have to be tied. Typically this would have to be tied in the concrete system. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to check for level to make sure that the rastra panels are dead on level, and you can see that we're just a little bit out, so we're going to raise this panel up, and we buy these pre-packaged shims and insert them inside the rastra, and then we use the hammer to drive this wedge in until we have the panel level to the point that we want it. Okay, we're using the glue about every 8 inches first. We'll come back in and put it in between these little dollops. You'll notice that we put the glue in solid on the corners to make sure that the cement, which is very wet when it goes in, does not leak out the sides. Even though this piece came broken, we don't worry about pieces like this because we can cut out a little chunk, put it in here, put some glue around the edges, and just continue on with the raster panels. You can see here that we've opened up the holes below and here so that when we pour the concrete in the horizontal cell, it will flow into this next wall. So when this next wall panel is placed, you butt straight up against this one. Always check your level, and you can see how the concrete's going to flow here and also on the lower level, and it will lock the entire panel together. Okay, placing the reinforcing steel is very similar to a corner. You take your 90 piece and lay it down on the corner on the T just like it was a corner, and lay your horizontal steel just like we did before, running in both directions.